Hi, my name is Cindy Campbell, and I'm the Program Director at the Children's Brain Tumor Project, a pediatric brain tumor research initiative at Weill Cornell Medicine. Along with my husband, I'm also the co-founder of the Ty Louis Campbell Foundation. We founded it in memory of my son, Ty, who passed away from a brain tumor in 2012. My purpose today is to raise awareness and inspire action in support of children with cancer by sharing my story and what I've learned after being personally devastated by a childhood cancer diagnosis myself. Ty died 13 days after his 5th birthday, and it was 2 years and 3 months after the day of his diagnosis. It was 2 years and 3 months of an eye-opening, gut-wrenching reality that I advocate to change so that someday I won't share that reality with so many other families. Ty was my first baby. He was my everything, my whole world. So like any new mom, I was worried over every little thing. His brother Gavin came along a year and a half later, and I was so overwhelmed with just having 2 babies under 2, a full-time job, and I felt like I had little sleep. And I specifically remember this one time that Ty was at the supermarket with me and he grabbed an apple from the pile and he took a bite before I could stop him. And I just was panicking over the dirt and the germs and the pesticides and it wasn't even an organic apple, and my head was spinning. And I just had no idea that was really actually blissful, that it was a bite of a dirty apple that was keeping me up at night instead of the beeping from his IV pole on the 9th floor of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Because when he was 2.5 years old, I went from worrying over organic produce and BPA-free cups to signing consents for his chemotherapy infusions. It's hard to imagine. I was supposed to wear gloves. And I remember this so specifically because I had to care for my own son, and I was supposed to protect myself because the treatment that he received in that tiny little growing body of his was toxic, and they didn't want it to cause me to get cancer. This photo I share because it was taken just 1 month before his diagnosis, and they discovered this tumor growing at the base of his skull. We don't even know how long it was there. He could have been bored with it. And to look at him, I mean, he was just so healthy. He was happy. He was athletic. He met all of his milestones. But this is how it starts for almost every child diagnosed with cancer. I mean, they were perfect. They all are, and they're fine until diagnosis day, and then everything changes. Ty seemed to be getting headaches at night, and he was having a hard time sleeping. After one particularly rough night, he seemed to be in pain. My husband and I decided to go to the hospital, and we wanted some peace of mind, so we pushed for an MRI. We were fully expecting to hear and learn about night terrors or some other sleep condition that we could treat with something like warm milk. You know, it's very naive. But instead, we were called into a conference room with no windows. There was an MRI image on the screen. And I swear it was like the walls just melted around us. And at the moment, we knew nothing would ever be the same. My eyes were open that day, and I'm here to share that eye-opening experience with you. It's so important that we become greater advocates for our children, and here's why. Because every 2 minutes, a child is diagnosed with cancer worldwide. That's 1 in 285 kids. It's 400,000 kids per year. Cancer is the #1 cause of death by disease among children 18 and under. A pediatric cancer diagnosis is it's almost a life sentence for everyone because the large majority of children subjected to today's treatment protocols will suffer serious side effects in the short and the long term that can compromise their quality of life for the rest of their lives. Therapies that are mostly used are adult hand-me-down agents that have been around for more than 50 years. They're overly toxic for children, but they just change the dose and give it to these poor little kids. But these agents, they're not designed to treat the unique pathology of children's cancers, nor are they designed to treat developing minds and bodies as these, considering the age that these kids are when they go through treatment. I mean, it doesn't even make logical sense that you're using the same medicine for adults on these children. I wouldn't give arthritis medication to my 6-year-old son because his wrist hurts. And I know that's oversimplifying a very complicated scientific problem, but still, the kids, we can do better than this. We can do better for the kids. Today's clinical research landscape, the progress is just far too slow, and the promise is rare. The average time for a therapeutic discovery that's to be tested in children can take 5 to 7 years. Ty was in treatment for 2.5 years. These children, they don't have time to wait for this science to get from the bench to the bedside. The possibility of discovering appropriate therapies can also be limited by the current research standards. If you want to have a clinical trial, large-scale studies are sometimes in order, but it's just a small range of candidates, or multi-center requirements, single treatment trials when it's already known that only a combination would be curative, or placebo groups. No parent would ever want to sign up for a placebo type of clinical trial. There's very narrow eligibility requirements for kids to even qualify for a clinical trial. And then finally, there's a huge market for drug development in adult cancers. It makes sense. There is profit to be made. In fact, cancer research in adults is largely funded by pharmaceuticals, and that doesn't even exist in childhood cancer because it is not cost effective to develop drugs for such a small population of children. So drug development is a huge roadblock. If you imagine 5 children are diagnosed with cancer, yes, the survival rates for children has improved. I mean, over decades, 80% of children are surviving their disease 5 years or more, and thank God. But if you look closer at the statistics, it's really only 1 out of 5 children who are actually surviving and thriving. The cost of survival is tremendous. 1 out of 5 kids, like my son, don't survive the first years of treatment. It simply doesn't work. We fail them. And another 1 out of 5 may survive 5 years, but not long term. They may have a recurrence or side effects from treatment that ultimately claims their life because you were pumping poison into the growing bodies of babies and kids and teens. The next 40%, 2 out of the 5 children that we're imagining here are suffering long-term effects that are detrimental to their future. They have side effects from being in a wheelchair, having an oxygen tank, cognitive delays. It's very significant. And so only 1 out of 5 children in this scenario survive cancer 30 years or more with few serious side effects. 1 out of 5 is not good enough. Childhood cancers are very different than adult cancers, but we know so much less about them because there's so many different types and the research is so fragmented. Kids don't get breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer. My son had an atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumor. 30 kids a year are diagnosed with this. It's unheard of. And that's the case for a lot of children, and we need a better understanding of all the childhood cancers before we can even dream of coming up with better treatment options. But this desperate need for research is met with only 4% of all government funding allocated for cancer research. And with only 4% specific to all childhood cancers, that doesn't account for then all the dividing up, that tiny slice of the pie is divided amongst all the different cancer types found in children and the different initiatives that are studying these smaller subtypes and cancer groups. The funding becomes insignificant. So if we're going to make any progress, funding is essential and the families have to step in to fill the gap. It certainly shouldn't be that way. I mean, moms and dads shouldn't be running marathons to fundraise for research, but it's the reality. And I'll tell you one thing for sure is that there is no greater advocate for this cause than the moms and dads who are on a mission. They're fierce, they're powerful, they're making a tremendous impact already, but we still need help. Innovation is stunted, drug development is almost non-existent, and the time it takes for the discoveries to go from the lab to the clinic are years that the kids simply don't have. I think there's a common thought process during any medical journey, and I call it, or reflect on it as, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. When my son was first diagnosed, all the scenarios go through your head, but you know that you have to hold on to hope and you have to stay positive. I was presented with a consent for surgery. It was highly invasive. The various approaches to take were nauseating just to think about it, just to discuss it with my doctor, to imagine that this was what my son was going to go through. And I was presented, to consign a consent of all the terrible things that might happen, like that could go wrong in surgery, from dying on the table to permanent brain damage. And as a parent, actually don't have a choice. If you want your child to survive, you sign. And you tell yourself, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Prior to chemotherapy, there's a similar list of terrible possible outcomes. And you read pages and pages of consents. And there's one risk that clearly states a significant chance of causing my child's secondary cancer in the future. So to that I looked and I kind of said to the room, so chemotherapy causes cancer? And the oncologist looked straight-faced and looked me right in the eye and he said, yes. So I thought, if that happens, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Other cancers might be more curable. We'll see, we'll get there. Then we were on to radiation. It was a long road. We were meeting with a radiation oncologist, and we're told it will result in cognitive delays. She actually explained it at the time that if he was going to be an A student, maybe he'll be a B student. If he's going to be a B student, maybe he'll be a C student. And my husband and I said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And so it went on and on, over and over, throughout 2.5 years, until his little body just couldn't take it anymore, and the bridge collapsed. There were no more options. There was no more bridge to foresee or to anticipate. And I remember that day really well, obviously, when the neurosurgeon, our trusted neurosurgeon who was on this journey with us, came into the room, and he confirmed that it was time to go home. And I have to admit that I carry tremendous guilt for not succeeding in saving my child's life. I felt, still to this day, feel like such a failure, because it's my job as a mom to make it better. And even worse is that with that defeat also came a tiny edge of relief, because we were finally given permission to just stop. And my little boy, he was sound asleep. He stayed asleep from the time we went from the hospital to the car that day. And there was no need for seatbelts. I sat in the back seat and put him on my lap. There's no 5-point harness, no more worrying about the little things. Didn't want to make him uncomfortable, so I just held him and I looked into his face for the entire 2-hour drive home. And I just wondered, what am I going to tell him when we get home? So you try not to cry, and you try to smile when he wakes up, and you have to say, hi, honey, we're home. And the doctor told us we never, ever have to go back to the hospital again, I promise. And you say it with excitement and a smile, because you know that's what he wants to hear. Happy to be home in the most unhappy of circumstances. If it's a baby, a child, a hormonal teenager, they're just kids. They need to be treated like kids. They need treatments that are designed for the developing minds and the bodies of children and young adults. And I'm dedicated to help bring the innovative advances in research to pediatrics, where it's most important that we leverage these less toxic and more effective options that combine the smart new approaches like immunotherapy, precision medicine, drug screening, targeted medicine. I brought these ideas to the table when our son was in treatment, and the science was there, but it wasn't available to kids yet. I'm finally seeing and so hopeful that the landscape is changing, but we still need a lot of help to get there. If you have the financial well-being, donations toward research funding are desperately needed, of course. But there's many, many ways you can help beyond that. And I hope you'll consider any of them, anything you can do. If you're not personally in a position to donate, there's peer-to-peer fundraising opportunities. For your favorite childhood cancer organization, you can walk, you can run a 5K, shave your head, just do push-ups for a month. There's really creative ways to fundraise. Or you can donate your time, which is so valuable. Volunteering, even sitting on a committee or a board of directors for an organization that you believe in could be extremely beneficial to this cause. You can donate your skill set. We need everything from artists who can deliver art therapy to accountants who can file a 990 for nonprofits. There's no type of giving that wouldn't be so well received. You can donate your voice, and you can share things on social media that way. You can talk to your local politicians. Any way that you can advocate for this cause is extremely beneficial. And you can donate your wisdom. You can take what you learned today and you can share it with your kids. So if they want to host a meaningful lemonade stand, you know, they will know this information and pass it on to their friends as well. And so there's just so many ways to get involved. I have a friend named Mary, and I was struggling with having a nonprofit and constantly having to ask for help. And she just said to me, "Don't stop asking, Cindy. Don't worry. Everyone can give a half a sandwich." And I hope after hearing my story and learning some facts about childhood cancer that you're inspired to do just that. Thank you.